Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Penny Lane podcast. We've got a fantastic show for you today. Blaine is going to be joined by Katie from the Money with Katie podcast and blog, as well as the Morning Brew. They're going to chat about finance, setting goals and growth, maximizing returns on your energy output, and a whole lot more. Make sure you are subscribed to the Penny Lane podcast over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, as well as the Penny Lane YouTube channel. Don't forget to turn on those notifications as well. Today's show is sponsored by Aries and Pennies Going in Raw.
The stock market is hotter than ever right now, and traders are taking advantage. But what does that mean for the people who still haven't started trading? The market can be a little intimidating at first, but you don't have to be alone in the learning experience. We at the Pennies Going in Raw podcast are here to help you. I'm Dan, and with my co-host Hugh Henney, we make the stock market a fun but informative experience for our listeners. We offer knowledge for all levels of traders, from beginners to those who do it full time. On PGIR, we discuss up-to-date news about the stock market and interview other traders who all started out just like us and made it big. You'll hear from Hugh and other multi-millionaire traders, founders and CEOs of companies, FinTwit superstars, and even professional athletes. Have you ever thought about investing your hard-earned cash but don't know where to start? Do you have money just sitting in your savings account collecting dust? We were all there once too. Listen to Pennies Going in Raw on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, Katie. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So could you just tell me a little bit about you?
Sure. What, with respect to what? What would you like to know?
Just sort of your background, really kind of very basic background info. I'd love to know where you're from and, just basic background information.
Cool. So I'm currently 27 years old. I live in Colorado, northern Colorado to be specific. And I grew up in Cincinnati, and actually it was a northern Kentucky suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio. And then went to Alabama for school, so spent a lot of time in the South. And then lived in Dallas for 5 years, and now I'm here. So kind of slowly making my way west across the United States. And I studied public relations in school, so definitely didn't ever have any sort of financial or business classes. I was studying communications and writing and storytelling and things of that nature. And then ended up getting a job at Southwest Airlines in Dallas after school, working in the marketing department, and that kind of morphed into like a UX writing job. So I was working on, the micro copy on websites and apps, and then that led me to a few other tech companies down the road. So it was a pretty drastically different full-time experience and like work experience than what I ended up doing now, which is being a personal finance blogger, writer, content creator, podcaster, like you name it. But I like to point to that as proof that no matter what you studied and no matter what you were told you were good at growing up, I was always told, oh, you're so good at English class. You're so good at reading and writing, but like math, no, not so much. Like you might as well not even bother. So it was like a funny little, overcoming that narrative that I'm not good at math or don't know anything about money. Those were all narratives that I like very much believed before I started doing this. And I think curiosity and persistence can take you a very long way in the age of the internet.
For sure. That's so funny. I am from Georgia. I went to Georgia. My husband works at Delta. All my in-laws live in Denver.
Oh my God, we have so much in common.
I know. I studied history, and I'm a professional painter, and got into the stock market during COVID, and now run a day trading podcast based on what you learn from the internet. So I'm very glad I asked for your full background. That's amazing.
We have a lot of similarities. That's so funny.
Yes. So, how did you take your first steps into the financial world?
I think how it all started, there were a couple key events that happened that made me interested. One, I think, was in 2017, and I was driving to a work event with a friend, and she was telling me about some guy she was dating. She's like, oh my God, he just made, I don't remember how much money it was. He just made this much money on some stock trade. And I was like, wait, what? Like, he did what? And it just piqued my interest, you know, because you hear about people using money to make more money. And you're like, wait, how does that work? And then from there, it was dating my now husband, who had a pretty substantial brokerage account at the time and was using it to put himself through law school. So he had made some offhanded comment about like, oh, when I started law school, like I've been using this same brokerage account and I've paid for 2 semesters and I already have more than when I started. And I was like, wait, what? Like you can grow. So it was just those types of conversations that really got me intrigued. And then I started telling people in my circle that I was interested. Like I started telling my friends, mostly my guy friends, because they were the ones that also cared, which was like part of what I wanted to change. I was like, well, why aren't women talking about this? So I started telling them, like I'm interested. I want to get started. I don't really know what to do. I had one female friend though that was like, buy this ETF, and this ETF. And I still to this day own those ETFs in Robinhood. But that was kind of like how I got started. And then once I started learning more about like, I learned about Betterment in 2018 and I was like, oh my God, what a concept. Like this, it'll do it for you. And then I found like the Choose FI podcast and like Brad and Jonathan and started following everything they were doing. And then they would have people on like Mad Fientist and Money Mustache and Financial Samurai and like all these people that now I've, had online conversations with and know, which is super cool. But yeah, it was kind of like you start to peel back the curtain a little bit and then you realize like, oh my God, there's this whole other world back here that I didn't know about. And not only is it like super interesting, but it's kind of life-changing. So I really wanted to share that information with other people, but it wasn't until 2020 and I had been reading and learning about this stuff for a couple of years that I was like, I'm just going to start my own blog. Like, who cares? I don't care if no one reads it. I just want to like put the information out there and like put my own spin on it because a lot of it's kind of boring. So might as well try to make it fun.
So we're like the same person. So hi, self. That's amazing. Amazing. Except my husband, I said, works at Delta and knows nothing about the stock market. So that's like I really had no guide except like the internet and sort of guy friends online because it's a very male dominated space.
Yep.
So, yep. How active are you? I mean, I follow you on Twitter, but like how important was Twitter in your journey?
Honestly, Twitter really wasn't at all in the beginning.
Fascinating. Okay.
I didn't really use Twitter at all. I used it for personal stuff. And it wasn't until I like really started leaning into Money with Katie that I started following financial people on Twitter. But I more so was like, I would say most of what I was learning came from podcasts and from blogs and books. And then the people that I was connecting with, oftentimes it was on Instagram. That was kind of the platform that I chose to like focus on. But in saying it that way makes it sound like there was some grand plan. There really wasn't. It was just I liked using Instagram. So I was like, oh, well, I've been writing this blog. I'm just going to like make an Instagram profile for it so I can post about new blog posts. And that way the people that follow me on my personal account that don't care about this stuff don't have to see it every day.
Sure.
So it kind of like took on a life of its own after that.
Very cool. Very cool. And isn't social media amazing for that? You can be I have my Twitter profile and I have my art Instagram and they're both great accounts and I am essentially 2 different people on them.
Yeah.
Like in those, I sort of thought like it took me years and years to build this Instagram account and I thought like in the Venn diagram there would be like a little bit of that I could get some art people over to the financial world and vice versa.
That's so interesting. I think that's funny. I heard people have asked me before and I've thought about this before in that sense of like people have said like, is Money with Katie a character? And I'm like, yeah, kind of. I mean, to some extent it is. And it's definitely reflective of my views about personal finance and the things that I'm truly learning about and thinking about in the moment. It's not there's no like grand strategy, I just sit down every Tuesday and I'm like, what am I interested in today? What do I care about right now? So there's certainly no like larger strategy than that. But it's funny because I think I did put my personal Instagram in the Money with Katie profile almost as like an experiment to see if people would like care. And it's funny because I think people probably go to my regular profile and they're like, this girl's boring. All she does is like take walks with her dog and like post pictures at airports. You know, it's like not very exciting. But that's really funny to hear that there's not a ton of overlap between the two, or that it's like, no, like art's my thing and like, or like money is my thing and I don't really care about the other.
Yeah, for sure. And like, money is an unpleasant thing for a lot of people to talk about. So I think there's a lot of people who aren't in this space who are like, I would not like to talk about that.
Yeah. It can be triggering and emotional for people for sure. That's why I think it's funny to like, or why I think it's important to create platforms where it doesn't have to feel that way, because I think the more you are exposed to something in like a lighthearted, fun, no judgment way, or hey, it doesn't matter. Like, you don't have to be a finance major. You don't have to be, you don't have to work in finance to care and like and talk about this stuff. Like, this is just as relevant to regular people too, and we're not going to hold it against you that you're a regular person. I think that's important because I think it can help start to deconstruct some of that distaste for the topic.
Absolutely. Have you found that I am like online a very outgoing person, but in real life fairly introverted. And I have found that knowing a lot about the stock market has been very, very helpful in public interactions, because it's like everybody knows about it, and you can kind of be like, oh, like right now, the Twitter thing with Elon Musk. I'm not sure I would have known or cared or anything, but now it very much, like you were saying, it opens this secret door to like all of these things. And like, I have to go to a cocktail party this afternoon, 100% chance that someone's going to be like, Blaine, what do you think's going on with Twitter or whatever? And I'll have an answer. Like, I've just found it very helpful.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I kind of relate to that in the sense that I feel like I'm pretty extroverted on the internet. I would say I am to some degree in real life, but it really depends on the context. So if I'm in a social setting where it's just like people I don't know, I'm not like gonna be the one that's going out of my way to like talk to everybody. I think I'm pretty social with like coworkers and things of that nature and like my actual friends, but people I don't know, I'm not as like outgoing, I think, as I am on the internet. But what has been funny to me and how I like have to catch myself sometimes is money is so a part of everyday life, no matter how much you want to pretend it's not. Like, the housing market, that's impacting everybody, and like what it's doing to rents nationwide, the cost of childcare, and like how hard it is to find a nanny. Like, all of these things come up in conversation with people all the time, and they have no intention of like going into a deep dive about macroeconomics or money. But anytime I like can't help myself. I'm like, oh, and did you know that this, and oh, and in 2021 this happened, and oh, and by the way, like this is why this is the way it is. And so I think that's it. It has turned me into like one of those people around certain topics, because that's just what my brain, it sounds depressing, but like that's what I'm always thinking about. Like, I think if you literally observed my brain throughout an entire day, pretty much all of my waking time, I am like thinking about those types of things, or thinking of questions about them, or finding blog posts or episodes or new books to read, or like discussing or debating something with somebody on the internet. Like, it's practically my whole life now. And that has some downsides too. I mean, like, I'm not really good at talking about anything else anymore, because it's like the only thing that I do. Aside from like what I'm watching on TV, I can talk about that for hours too. I watch something on Netflix or Hulu every single night. But yeah, it's funny. It's like I've never been so like enamored with a topic and for this long. Like, I have an obsessive personality, but like I've never stuck with the same thing for like years, because there's just always more to learn. And like, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know anything. And that's that's like the tipping point where you're like, oh my God, there is so much to know.
Totally. I think we're on an hour or 130 30 hours of the podcast so far.
Oh
We're
my
over 100 episodes.
That's
and I'm
crazy.
literally like, we have not scratched the surface. Like,
I know.
There it is. And I've always wanted a podcast. And the most obvious one for me to do was painting or art or whatever. And I was like, I don't know if I have that level of curiosity because I'm very much in my lane. I'm doing my own thing. I'm doing my own art. But this, it's an ADD person's dream.
Yeah.
Because you're like,
yes.
there's more over here. There's more over here. There's more over
Yes.
here.
Oh my God, it's so true.
Totally. So the Morning Brew got me into trading.
Oh my God, no way.
Yeah. And I credit them with that constantly. Big fan of the Morning Brew.
Aw.
And the way it happened was during COVID, I had a lot more time on my hands.
Yeah.
So I was already subscribed, but I started reading more often. And honestly was like, I think that I thought that there was going to be a shortage of meat in the beginning of COVID. So I thought that it would be really smart to buy Beyond Meat in the case that there was like a meat shortage. And then sort of like Pfizer as well. A sort of like, oh, Pfizer might be like dipping its toe into a cure for COVID. Let me like kind of get in there. And then like you on Robinhood, bought the stocks, started watching them obsessively, and then buying things that it recommended to me, like Workhorse was a huge stock in COVID. And so I was looking at Robinhood all the time.
Yeah.
And my husband was like, you're not investing, you're trading. And I was like, I know, you know. But I like got all my stock tips from the Morning Brew. So if it were no Morning Brew, I wouldn't be here today, I don't think. So
I'll tell Neil. Well, and the other
Huge.
writers. Neil's like the one that I speak with the most, but he writes the daily letter.
yeah, I owe them,
Oh my
a
God,
gift,
that's so funny.
a huge gift. It changed. I am not the same person I was before this. So anyway,
Aw,
thank you.
Me neither, honestly.
For sure. So tell me how you got sort of hooked into how your blogs turned into a podcast, turned into being associated with the Morning Brew.
Yeah, so little timeline, I guess. In April of 2020, I started the blog, and then I really didn't have any plans for it. I didn't know how often I was going to publish or like what it was going to turn into. It wasn't until July, really, maybe like June, July, a couple months later, that I was in the running for a job at NerdWallet to be a travel rewards writer, so to write about travel credit cards and like how to get, use points. And that was always like something I like loved because it just feels like such arbitrage. And so I didn't get the job, and it was like the most grueling interview process. Like I went through like 6 rounds of interviews and like a bunch of sample pieces that I had to write, which are actually now live on Money with Katie, because I was like, well, screw that. I'm going to publish them as myself then. And
Sure.
when I didn't get the job, my whole like consolation to myself, at first I was really upset, but then it was kind of like one of those moments where you're like, well, wait a second. I just spent all this time telling these people that I really want to write about money. Like, I don't need them to write about money. I can write about money by myself. Like, I don't need them for that. And so that was kind of the point that I was like, I'm going to try to publish twice a week blog posts on my new website for a year. I'm going to do it for 52 weeks. I'm going to write 104 posts. And if after that point, nobody cares and no one's reading it and it's a flop, then fine, I'll go do something else and I'll accept that I'm not very good at this. But that's not what happened. And so I started doing that in like July. By September of 2020, I think I made the Instagram account, and it slowly started to grow. And then I remember it was a big day when my Money with Katie following surpassed my personal number of followers, because I was like, oh wow, like I'm actually like, people actually care about this. And so that was kind of that, those two things were kind of in tandem for a while. It was the blog and the Instagram account. And then the podcast didn't come along until October of 2021. So almost a full year later, that I had kind of always been interested in podcasting because it was a medium that I listened to so often and was such an avid consumer of podcasts. So I was like, it kind of doesn't make sense that I'm not even like leveraging this platform myself, because like I don't really sit around and read blogs all day, but I do listen to podcasts all day. So that was kind of the mental switch in October of last year to I'm going to go start this podcast. And then probably a month later, that was when Austin and I got connected, the CEO of Morning Brew. And we started talking about their personal finance content, and it kind of went from there. So the podcast has only been around for 6 or 7 months, I guess, at this point. So definitely a lot younger than the blog is, but it is quickly becoming like my favorite thing that we do, simply because I just love the medium so much. It's like the way that all of my podcast episodes start is as a blog post. Like everything just gets written in a Google Doc, and then I figure out later, like, do I want this to be an episode or do I want this to be a blog? Like, do I want people to be reading this or listening to this? And typically it's the topics that I find are maybe a little more sensitive or like require more nuance, or I really want somebody to hear my tone. That's where I'll go the podcast route. And then I'll decide, like, who do I want to be the guest? Who would be really cool for this? Whose perspective would be interesting to hear on this topic? And so that's kind of been the process for building it. But it's been really cool, and I'm glad that I did it, because I think initially I had a lot of resistance to it. I was like, oh, I should just do two blog posts a week. And it was a big deal for me to like stray from that and replace the Wednesday post as a episode, because I was like, I don't know if I'm going to be good at podcasting. Like, what if this flops? What if I hate it? What if I just want to be a writer? But fortunately, I like the sound of my own voice too much to not like podcasting. So yeah, that's how we got here.
I love it. And what a cool, I'm really into manifesting.
Me too. Literally.
And that, like, you're like, I'm just going to do, I also wrote a blog for 10 years. So,
oh, really? Oh my God.
I mean, we're just really.
We're on the same page.
We're on the same page. And I still write it sometimes, actually. So, but what a cool thing to be like, I'm going to put these steps in motion, and the universe then sort of like collaborated with you to put opportunities in front of you, and then it snowballed. And now I've been thinking that so much, like right at this time in my life. Actually, the other day I was in the car with the whole family, and my son was like, Mom, when was like the happiest time in your life? And I was like, well, I was really happy when I was like 17 or 18. And like my whole life was in front of me, and I had what I wanted to do with it, and I wanted to be married, and I wanted to have kids, and sort of like all of that was so hopeful. And then I think like right now, because it's the culmination of 20 years of sort of striving. Like, I've got the 2 kids, I've got my husband, I've got this podcast, I've got a career I'm proud of. I've sort of stepped into, this is who I always wanted to be. And like, what a cool thing. And I feel like the universe is very I just kept sort of, I did the blog, I did my art, I started the podcast, I started trading, and it didn't happen overnight for me at all. It's just been like one step in front of the other instead of the other. But I wake up every morning and I'm like, I think it's happening. I think all the things are
I love that. I
like
love
coming
that.
together.
I think it's happening. It's funny you say
happening.
that. I have a thing behind me. I made it in, let's see. It was September 22nd, 2019 is when I wrote this on a little card. I did this goal setting session because I was a fitness instructor at the time. And so Lululemon would come and do like goal setting workshops with us. And yeah, I like went through the whole workshop. This was obviously very pre Money with Katie. Like the blog was still, it'd be 6 or 8 more months before the blog even existed. So very early on, but I had written, I remember like we had to set this very specific goal, and I wrote, I will double my corporate income by doing purpose-driven work by March 2021. And I remember it was like, like 18 months away. Like that was like the benchmark I gave myself for the goal, because I think that was what they recommended, like a year and a half. And I remember writing that and being like, how the F am I going to pull that off? Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to do that. I don't even know what I'm going to do. Like, what does purpose-driven work even mean? But like at that point in time, I like knew enough that, it's like, I really, it sounds so weird, but I literally conceptualize of it almost like a baby. Like, I was like, it was like gestating almost. It's like, sure. I knew there was like something that was supposed to happen, and I could like sense that it was on the horizon, but I didn't know what it was or what shape it was going to take, or like what I even wanted to do. At the time when I wrote it, I remember thinking I might become a full-time fitness instructor. That was like what I was kind of conceptualizing when I was writing it. But it was crazy because I found it a couple, shortly after March 2021. And I don't think I had quite doubled my income by that point, but Money with Katie ended up being like 4 times my corporate income in 2021. So it was one of those things where if I didn't believe in manifestation before, I certainly did after that happened, because I was like, holy shit, I didn't even like know what I didn't even, it wasn't even like a concept in my brain yet, but just like putting it out there, like I will do this. It's just crazy.
This episode is sponsored by Aries, the newest trading broker offering both mobile and desktop trading. The app is built for retail traders by retail traders, and they welcome user feedback. Do you ever nail the entry on a trade but can't get filled? You won't need to worry about that anymore, because they are a self-clearing brokerage direct to exchange with TradeStation, and they are much faster than other brokerages that route through a clearinghouse. Aries is a multi-asset platform. You are able to trade stocks, options, futures, index options, crypto, and micros. You are also able to buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrencies. Lastly, earn up to 5% interest on eligible crypto assets with no lockups. Aries has partners and offers many free tools such as advanced charting, TradingView with unlimited charting and indicators, free options flow, dark pool data, and many more tools on their roadmap to come. This is on average a $50 to $100 per month value, all for free. Finally, you can withdraw and deposit actual crypto and transfer to the US dollar and use it to trade any trading assets offered. Aries is the first brokerage to offer this. Please click the link in our bio or go to www.tradearies.com/PennyLane to sign up for an account today. I am a huge believer. I used to write 2 blogs. One was about photography and real estate and my art and all of that. And then I had a second blog called Blaine's One Thing. And the concept of the blog was that I would do one thing a day to move myself forward. And at the time, I wanted to be a gallery represented artist. So whether it was like writing a cold email or submitting to a gallery, whatever it was, I would do one thing and then I would put it on the blog. And although I ended up merging that blog into my other blog, I really have stuck by that as like, the idea is to do something today that my future self will thank me for, whether that's eating a salad or not taking that risky trade that could blow up your account, or like for you, for example, I just was kind of like, I think that I would like to know her. So sending you a DM or whatever would be like one thing that could help me sort of on this path. And, at some point, like the manifesting, those things do start to snowball. And you can go, just for anybody listening, if you want to try that, you can go for like months where nothing happens. And then you kind of get one thing will work and it'll trigger other things that you've done. But anyway, I don't think that manifesting in and of itself is enough. I think manifesting with like a little bit of work toward the goals is the magic.
1000%. I mean, it's like, I think for me, it always came down to just being open to my own intuition. Like there were like little pings that I would like either like ignore or run with. And like the idea to start the blog and call it Money with, I mean, like everything in retrospect, I'm like, I don't even know why I followed through with that, or like why I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to spend 8 hours today doing that. I have no idea. And so I think there's like that element of it. And the other thing that I will think about sometimes is how this is like a kick I've been on recently, that I feel like effort in life and like what you expend your energy toward. Sometimes I'll hear from people that like want to start a blog or like want to start something. It doesn't really matter what it is, but they're just kind of like on the fence about whether to do it or not do it. And I get the sense from them, and I've felt this way myself in the past, that you're almost like, well, I don't want to like dump a bunch of time and energy into it if it's not going to pay off. And
totally.
My whole perspective on that now is that 98% of the things that you do in life are not going to pay off. 98% of the energy you expend is not going to do anything. But the 2% that does is going to give you such outsized returns that it's going to make all of that look like nothing. And that's kind of, I kind of like liken it to like an index fund. Like you buy an index fund, let's pretend you buy the S&P 500. All right, well, maybe over the course of the next 30 years, 350 of those companies go bankrupt or like are no longer in the S&P 500. Let's say, I don't know, 100 of them, you know, kind of do okay, but kind of fall flat. But as long as like that 50 just are amazing, like your returns are going to be amazing. And so I think of energy and like expending energy in the same way, where like I might meet 15 people and go out of my way to meet them and get to know them and network with them. And like that relationship may never go anywhere. Or it could be the person that like ends up being my next business partner. Like you just don't know. And so I think that like decision paralysis or analysis paralysis of like, shouldn't I? It's like we waste so much time in that space. And I think the moment we accept that like majority of our energy is going to be wasted and it's just like being a volume shooter and just like getting as much out there as possible, that's where I think you start to find the returns. It's like if you're too worried about being like surgical and strategic in what you're doing, you're going to take too few shots.
Yep. That's so much. I always think that trading is it is life. I've learned that so much, just like being in the trenches trading every day. And what you said is so similar to, I have a 40% win rate on my trades.
Oh my God. Wow.
So as long as you get a good risk reward and, you know, you can take 10 trades and 6 of them are not going to work. And as long as you keep those losers small, if you let those 4 work out the way they should, that return is going to so much more than cover the cost. But you got to shoot your shot, right? You have to like be in the trade to get the
upside
return. Yeah.
Totally.
And there are so many successful traders who have a 10%, and they're very successful, but they just hit home runs. And
wow.
But you know, not everything is a home run, obviously. But
yeah, for sure. Oh my gosh, that's really interesting.
The more I'm like deeply into the trading world, the more I'm like, it's being a mom, it's being a wife, trading is just. But I'm also obsessed, so I'm gonna find like.
I love that you're obsessed, though. I think it's fun to have something like that and to be that into it. How do you determine? You mentioned that as long as the losers are small enough bets, how do you determine the size of the positions you're taking in things? Is it correlated to the confidence you have that it's going to work out, or do you have like a system for determining what type of like the size of the bet you're going to place?
Thank you so much for asking. If you had asked me a couple months ago, I would not have an answer to that.
Well, I'm glad I asked now then.
Yes. So I have been doing this challenge that I called the Apple Challenge. So I've been trading for 2 years, and it has not been easy. In fact, I just had to look at what I lost in 2021, and I lost $30,000 in 2021. That's not a small amount of money, right? It's a lot. And I kind of like traded, hit rock bottom, and had to implement a system. Because just taking things left, right, and center and not having a plan and not having risk management was not working for me. And when I started trading, I thought that maybe I was special. No one is special. Like, it's
no
like
one is
not,
special.
Yeah, the market will chew you up, spit you out. You're not special. You're not smarter than the market, whatever. So, in mid-February of this year, I had just like a terrible, terrible day. Was like, this is the rock bottom. This is the worst it's going to get. And I had $10,000 left in my account. And I talked to my mentor, and he was like, what you need is confidence. So I need you to try to make $50 a day only trading Apple. And I need you to do it for 2 weeks, and then we'll like reassess. And his name is Jason Spadafora. He's on Twitter as the Wolf of Weed Street. He's a famous trader, famous investor. And part of me with the special thing was like, of course I can make, I've made thousands of dollars in a day. Like, of course I can make $50. But the secret to that challenge was to make the $50 and keep it. And if you didn't hit your goal, you had to start over. So I got through that 2 weeks of the $50. Then I did 2 weeks at $100, 2 weeks at $150, and you tap out at $250. And the idea is, if you can make $250 a day consistently, you can make any amount of money in the stock market that you want to, because you've developed the skills on how to control yourself and whatever. So when I had the $10,000 account, every position size I bought was $500.
Okay.
And then, so that was a very long way of answering your question.
I'm appreciative of the context because it makes sense.
So,
I mean, I understand like where you're going with this.
So I, $500, and then I didn't go from 500 to 600 to 700. Like, I made the $50, and then I tried to just hold those positions longer to make 100. And so after I became consistent, I was able to like stretch the trades out to make that capital work more for me. And I eventually got up to $1,000 positions. And so increasing the position and stretching the length. And then now I'm up to making $1,000 a day. So I was trading Comcast this morning, and I had like a $3,500 position. So, but I did try to like incrementally go up. So my account now in doing the whole thing is about $16,000. So it's not like my account like quadrupled, because I truly don't think the stock market works that way. But it has been a very slow and steady increase. And so that is a larger position size of my account that I normally would trade. But because I feel confident and have a system and know exactly what I'm risking, it's not as like scary.
Yeah. Yeah. That
anyway,
makes sense.
that's where I am on this. Hopefully I can go to like $1,500 a day, and we can keep going, and I won't blow up my account again. I mean, fingers crossed.
What was it? One trade that blew up your account in 2021?
No,
it was just overall.
It was just overall sort of small cuts. I've always been very good at not blowing up my account in like one fell swoop. That's never been my thing. Yeah. So it was just like paper cut, paper cut, paper cut. And then I made this huge decision to switch. I started in with small caps, like penny stocks, and that market for that is so bad post AMC GME squeeze that I decided to learn options. Switched to options in 2022 in January. And then that learning curve was just sort of like on a very slow downward trajectory, but I was just learning. And over that time realized that when I followed other people's trades on Twitter or in the media or whatever, I would lose every single time because it wasn't my trade. Yeah. So I had to learn how to find my own trades and take my own trades. And I was really on the upswing for that. And then the rock bottom came when I got my very first 100% gain on an options play that I found myself. It was an AMD put. It was the most beautiful play. And then got kind of greedy, took someone else's call, and ended up red on the day. And that was like the nail in the coffin, was like, you've come so far, but you don't have the confidence to like continue. So that led me to the Apple Challenge, and here I am.
Here you are. That is
here
so
I
wild.
am.
How much? Can I ask how much you started with?
Sure. 25,000.
Oh, okay. So, I got you. So you started with 25,000, got up to the point where you were even able to lose 30 and still have 10 left.
No. So you have to, as I'm sure you know, you have to have 25,000 to day trade in a margin account.
Oh, okay, sure.
Okay. So actually, I started with 28,000 and then lost that money and had to continue depositing money in order to be able to day trade. So, that's how I lost the money, is I would just put in like $500 a week to keep the account. And then finally...
Are you using Robinhood?
No.
What do you use?
No. I use Thinkorswim.
Thinkorswim?
TD Ameritrade.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that.
It is, it's really an incredible trading platform. And I just actually signed a partnership with another broker that's called Aries. So I'm going to like work with them on the blog. But have you heard of Webull?
Yes.
Okay. So it's like a new Webull.
Oh, okay.
This Aries broker, and it works through TradeStation. So it's anyway, I'm excited to see where the company goes.
Yeah,
I think
that's
it's cool.
wild. I don't know much about the trading world. I mean, like I feel like what I always got into with personal finance, I mean, like I like learning about investing, but I think the stuff that I find really fascinating about investing is some of those more macroeconomic discussions where it's like the impact of the Fed, or how policy impacts the markets. I think those things are really, really fascinating, and just the way that some of the really, really intelligent wealth managers like think about money and risk mitigation. And I find all of that very fascinating. I don't think I would have the confidence to get in there and like try to make money like that. I definitely have always skewed more of like, I'm going to buy my index funds and then like go increase my income and then just shovel more money into the index funds, which doesn't feel very good right now given where we're at in the market. But last year it felt great. I was like, this is amazing.
This is free.
I'm like, oh my God, this is so easy. Index funds are the best. And now I'm like, damn it, this is the part that you have to just like grit your teeth and hope that you're diversified enough to weather the storm. And yeah, the more I learn, the more I'm like, damn, it's just so funny how ironically, I feel like my confidence has been inversely correlated with the amount I've learned. Because as I've learned more, the more I'm like, oh my God. Like,
sure.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're a good pair then, because those things I don't know anything about. The Fed meeting, yeah. Interest rates, not really. Like, overall state of the market.
Really. You're funny.
Nah, it's not that. But like what happened on Netflix, I am like in there. So yeah, I can so speak funny. Like broadly to like, yeah, we're in a market pullback. Why? I'm not sure.
Right,
but,
right.
You know,
I know. But like that's the thing is like, to some extent, like we can all point to reasons, right? We can all be like, well, rate hikes, or well, the war. Like there are things that you can point to, be like, that's why this is happening. But at the end of the day, it's so sentiment driven that I'm not sure that as it's happening or before it happens, we're really able to adequately assess those factors. And I always think about the end of 2019. And I think it was 2019 when, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe it was 2018. No, it was 2018 when it was like Christmas Eve and the stock market like plummeted on Christmas Eve. I think that was 2018, but all my years are all jumbled ever since the panini. Anyway, in December of 2019, January 2020, like I went back and was like reading some like headlines from CNBC and like Bloomberg about what was going to be impacting the markets that year. And it's like, trade war with China and like Trump and China and all. I mean, like, pandemic is not on anyone's radar. And I feel like that's how it always is the big market maker events, the big things that like truly like change everything. 9/11, like no one sees that stuff coming. And we spend a lot of time worrying about the risks that we think we can see, like Y2K in 1999. Like everyone's talking about it. The news makes this big deal about it. Womp womp, nothing happens. It's like, oh, okay, well, move on. Everything's fine. And then 9/11 happens. And it's like, and that ended up being a very, very, very significant part of the 21st century. And so I think that there's just some humility that those types of events, 9/11, global financial crisis, COVID-19, that they teach us about our inability to really adequately predict and mitigate all risk. Because at the end of the day, the risk that you're aware of, you're going to mitigate. You're going to do something about it. You're going to protect yourself from that downside. But that means inherently that like whatever's left over is the actual risk that you're going to have to contend with when it comes, and hope that whatever you've done and whatever strategy you have is going to be able to withstand it. But at the end of the day, we just don't know.
And once again, isn't that a beautiful parallel between the market and life?
And life. Yeah, it really is. You're so right.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Thanks for
landing
the plane for me. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, I've talked, my son has dyslexia, and we've done all the things. We've gotten him in school. We've done da-da-da-da-da, but we couldn't plan for this, right? Yeah. And that it's a risk or whatever that no matter what kind of parenting we did, we weren't really prepared for that. And isn't that life? Like health things and car wrecks, things like outside of our control. Same thing.
Yeah. And it almost makes you want to, there's like some degree of helplessness, I think, that can or like feelings of helplessness that can accompany that. But that's almost where I think like acceptance of it ahead of time, of like things are going to happen to me that I have no control over, and bad things are going to happen that I have no control over. In a weird way, it can bring you some peace of like, okay, this is just part of the contract of life, that like I'm not going to always be in control, and that's okay. I think it's when we delude ourselves into thinking we're in control that we fall really hard from grace, because it's like, why did that happen? That shouldn't have happened to me. Like, I don't deserve that, or like I planned in a way that should have prevented this, or like, that type of stuff. And I think I'm a control freak, so that I'm mostly speaking to myself right now, if I'm being honest. Oh, this is my cat. You're about to see his butt. Sorry. Hey, buddy.
Well, I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with what you're saying. It's sort of like we're all living here knowing that, like, no one's getting out of this alive. Like, right? Like, there's like a thing hanging over all of us, but you just got to do the best you can.
Yeah.
Day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point.
Yeah. During my trading days, at least once a day, someone's like, the market's rigged. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, of course, but like
that's the game you signed up for.
Yeah. Right.
Oh man.
All right. So what do you see as like, what does your next year look like as far as the podcast, and what some plans that you have?
Oh man. Well, as we just covered, the best laid plans usually go awry. So maybe I shouldn't commit to these too much, but I think right now what's kind of on my radar, like, so with the podcast right now, we're doing one episode a week, and we're doing one blog post a week. We have a newsletter, and then a whole lot of content on Instagram and, some Twitter. And I think what I'm really hoping, professionally, like for the business where I'm hoping we get a year from now, would be scaling up to 2 episodes a week. And we've even talked about starting a second show. And now what that show would focus on, I'm not sure, because obviously the Money with Katie show is very broad. I cover a lot of different things. It's very, there's a wide scope of coverage that we do. And so I don't know what the next show would maybe even be about, whether it would focus on like just scaling up your income or whether it would have a focus on like women in particular. Like I have no idea. But I definitely think that there's opportunity there. And so if I had to guess, that's probably what would end up being like the next big change now that we've kind of got things rolling a little bit and we have a bit of a routine that is working. Personally, I think for me over the next year, my hope is that, and we've talked about this on Twitter before, my hope is to get better at being okay with people not agreeing with me and people not liking me. I think I didn't realize I was a people pleaser until I started doing this and realized how much it would hurt my feelings, and I would take it to heart when someone would leave a 1-star review or someone would like reply to something I post and say like, you're an idiot or you don't know what you're talking about or whatever. And I think I'm slowly but surely starting to get to the point where I'm realizing that those people don't matter and that like they're not worth my time. But it's hard because I'm by nature tend to be pretty agreeable. And I think the one thing that I'm constantly reminding myself every single day is some of the most prominent personalities, like people who have made their personality and their opinions, their job and their public figure status, are all people that are extremely polarizing. Like Joe Rogan is my go-to example because he is so polarizing. He has a massive audience. And I heard this quote the other day where they were like, some people like hot tea and some people like cold tea, but nobody likes warm tea. It's like when you try to dilute yourself so that everyone will agree with you and like you don't say anything interesting or worthwhile. If people aren't,
love that.
Like if people aren't disagreeing with you, you're not saying anything new. You're not adding any new value. And you're really not expressing anything, like you're not expressing an opinion that's probably worth having if everyone is just like, yeah. So I think that's what I'm trying to get more used to and like really internalize, because like I know it up here, but then like dagger in the heart when someone's like, you're an idiot, you don't know anything. I'm like, yeah, maybe I am and maybe I don't. And so I'm trying to really be like, no, you just don't agree with me and that's fine. Like we can agree to disagree. But yeah, I think that's probably that's the thing that I'm personally working on over the next year, because it's hard. It's hard being on the internet, and it's especially hard to be a woman on the internet, especially in a male-dominated space where people kind of, you have to like really show up and show out before they'll give you the time of day, I think.
Yeah.
Because they assume that you don't know what you're doing.
Yep. And like, God forbid you say something stupid, too, like really wrong.
Yeah.
Then you lose all your credibility, where if a man did that, be like, oh, it's a mistake. Or,
yeah, exactly. Your margin of error is so small.
Tiny. Yeah.
So working on that personally.
Yeah, no, I for sure feel that. Well, congratulations on putting yourself out there.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you. I had one of my very best friends is a beautiful singer, like beautiful, beautiful. And she and her husband moved to Nashville, and she's working her ass off in Nashville to make it. And like, she's got a recording deal and she's on the road and she's grinding and grinding and grinding. And she went into a restaurant the other day. She did a sold out show. Her two best friends from Atlanta came to surprise her, and they went to a bar after. And she and her best friends walked in with her husband, and this guy was like, hey, you fat bitch. After everything. And she wrote this long Instagram post just about all of that.
Wow.
And she was so vulnerable in sharing the story. And I'm so proud of her for doing that and like taking a stand as someone who is kind of in the public eye. But I am so impressed by anyone who has a dream and puts themselves out there and makes themselves vulnerable, especially in front of their family and friends who are maybe like, I don't know what it makes people uncomfortable. But to have the balls to go out there and chase your dreams, and it opens you up to a little bit of public ridicule. And I'm just a big fan of women who do it. So congratulations for opening yourself up for that kind of criticism. That shows you as just such a strong person.
Thank you. And I agree. Likewise, feel the same about you and your friend. I mean, like, exactly. And to land this plane, same conclusion of, like, no one's getting out of it alive, so, like, might as well, right? Like, what's the worst that could happen? But
someone calls you a fat bitch.
Yeah, that's the worst. That's like, I'll bounce back from that. That would be okay.
It's gonna hurt. It's not gonna kill you.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Blaine, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much for coming on. And I'm so glad we can make it work. And I'm so glad to know you.
Me too. We'll have to keep our Twitter alliance strong.
For sure. For sure. Okay. Well, I'd love to have you back on anytime.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
By accessing this podcast, you acknowledge that the Penny Lane podcast makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional or financial advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, the Penny Lane podcast does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. The third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of the Penny Lane podcast. The Penny Lane podcast assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast, or the compliance with applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.